Your inner narrative is not just a story. It is the architect of your reality. It is the script that your subconscious mind reads from every single day. And whatever your subconscious accepts, the conscious mind begins to manifest. That's psychological at best. See, your inner narrative says you're a failure. If your inner narrative says you're a failure, you will subconsciously seek out situations that reinforce that failure. You will sabotage yourself. You will block your own blessings, not because the world is against you, but because your inner world is in a rebellion against your higher self. Your inner narrative is is internal programming, passed down through trauma, through your past life, through situations, and through culture, and also through miseducation. So, if you want to change your reality, you must first change your narrative, and that narrative is about yourself, not the narrative of the oppressor, not the narrative of the media, not the narrative of whomever it is that you think you can blame. Who you are, who you were told that you are, and who you were told that you can be. All of that is designed from within, and you start to tell yourself these things. So as we break down this topic today, we hope to reveal some things about ourselves that we seek to change so that we can live better and do better. Okay, first and foremost, let's jump on this ball rolling. First question, brothers. What is an inner narrative and how does it form?
I jump out there first. When I think of inner narrative, and you kind of hit it in the intro, is the version of the story that we tell ourselves. Um, I believe that is formed sometimes because of experiences, of things we've heard, we've read, you know, the makeup of what we call our reality, right? Not our truth. I don't like that because there's only one absolute truth. Um, but and what makes up our reality, which is the information and the experiences we gather throughout time, and it begins to shape the way we tell the story, to shape the way we see the narrative behind, you know, relationships, successes and failures, opportunities, all kind of things. And so and sometimes our emotion can kind of shape the way we're viewing or the way we're narrating that story to ourselves too. Because I'm mad because he or she did this, I'm seeing it through a lens of them being wrong versus through a lens of finding self accountability and how can I get better. So it's the story that we tell ourselves, the version of the story we tell ourselves, and it comes from our experiences, our gathered information, and sometimes our emotions.
I like that. I like that. My take on this question is it's not only the story that we tell ourselves, it's the story that's also have been implanted inside of you. When you look at your upbringing, you look at the dominant voice within your within your neighborhood, within your school system, within your church. That kind of helps to shape an image of not only who you are, but kind of like what you're capable of, and what your future can look like. And so at that point, that inner narrative, which was kind of given to you and created for you, even if we don't challenge any of that, it kind of starts defining what your future looks like. So out of fear of going too far, it is the story that exists within us, whether it was implanted, whether it was shaped, formed by all of the dominant voices in your life. And ultimately, it's like the story that we end up creating when it comes down to the life that we live.
I'm glad that you pointed out the dominant voices because we hear a lot of voices. Some of them we take on as like you and the Uncle Brigade, and you and Gaddy and his mother and father, how they reared him, and me and how my father was with me. We may take those dominant voices from our past, present, or even you know wherever you were in life, and you take what they said about you, and now it becomes part of the fabric of your life, part of how you do things. Uh, the NCOs did it like this, so that's just how I'm gonna do it. So in turn, what we do is as we're going, like, you know how it was in the military when they would always say, take that and put it in your toolbox. And so now you resembled those senior NCOs that help guide you. So I appreciate that. Let's jump on the second one. How does your inner dialogue influence your everyday reality?
So this kind of gets after what I was saying previously. It not only influences it, but I think it also shapes it because it becomes the limitations that you have prescribed for yourself. So it doesn't, it gives you permission to do the things that you do, but it also prevents you from doing the things that you're capable of doing. And then when you attempt to do those things that go outside of what that narrative looked like, now that inner dialogue starts working against you. It starts telling you that, well, that's not for you. You're not capable of doing that. It goes back to that information that you were fed earlier. You got to be twice as smart. You got to be, work twice as hard. Like all of those things now start working against you, but it works against you outside of the scope of what you imagine being able to accomplish. Within the scope of that, it actually works for you. So now being twice as smart and working twice as hard within the scope of your understanding of what you're capable of doing, you start putting those things into practice. So it not only, like I said previously, it not only defines it, but it also limits you at the same time.
I like that. And I'm glad this was the follow up because I did have uh, a rebuttal, right? Because when we talk about the dominant voices, right? For me, that's the question. Like, how does it influence your everyday? The voices that are dominant. First off, I think we get to there's a moment where we get to choose those dominant voices. Sometimes once you start believing a thing, we tell us the inner narrative kind of gives us a pretextual uh, understanding or pretextual context that we like to give ourselves when gathering information going forward, when we're viewing life going forward, when we're understanding people going forward. Right, there's a pretext that we give ourselves, but it's because the dominant voices that we chose to believe or to follow in the beginning. Um, and it's easy to say because I did hear you got to be twice as smart, work twice as hard, and twice as this, twice as that. But that wasn't the voice that I listened to. Not that we didn't have it hard or harder in America than most, but it was the narrative of what God has for me is for me. Like that was the dominant voice for me. So the narrative of the story going forward, whether and sometimes that caused me, like in my everyday life, sometimes that caused me not to take proper accountability of why I didn't achieve a thing in the time because I threw it on, well, what God has for me is for me. If it's for me, it's going to come. All right. And some things have come that I didn't have to work as hard for. And some things I had to put in the work to get there. Right. And so when we choose that dominant voice and we build these, as I think I said it one Sunday, these preconceived ideas or notions about a thing, we move forward with those things as our baseline. And so it kind of caters to to what you say yes to what doors you walk through, to what voices you listen to in the future. Because sometimes somebody can be giving me good information, but they said something that contradicted the voice that I decided to listen to when I was 14 or when I was a private, that NCO that I decided was going to be the dominant voice or the dominant figure that I looked to. This person may have contradicted what they taught me. And so I shun it. And it depends on what those voices are telling you to.
Yeah, because I think that easy way to look at how it's influenced, because we've heard a lot of how men should be the providers and protectors. And so people get that and they say, yeah, I'm a provider. They add that to their toolbox and they think, oh, I'm solely this, and then other people see, if you're not this, then you're not that. And so what it does, it pits us against one another. So I say it's not like, if I am a provider and a protector, I am more than that. But because your notion is that this is all men have to be. This is, hey, this is it. If you're not this, you're not a man. If you don't have $100,000, if you don't, so now those narratives have come into your psyche, and you've made that the identity of what you expect. So when the inner narrative is telling you, man, he ain't providing like my daddy. He ain't providing like I see this dude on TV, because we watch a lot of television, we watch a lot of social media, and we see other people doing these things. That's why you have around this time frame, a couple of weeks ago and last week, you've seen a large influx of people going to prom, and everybody got to outdo one another, because the inner narrative is, if I don't have this, if mine isn't this big, then I'm looked at as a failure. And it's like, hold up, you ain't even got a college fund, but yet you're trying to push this to be the major catalyst getting you off to adulthood. So when it comes to how it shapes your reality, I think it shapes our reality in a major way, because we use things a lot of times in negative ways to reinforce negative tropes and stereotypes, because it's what other people have said.
But so, because I think that's kind of like, okay, let's back up a little bit, because I don't want people to get misconstrued and misinterpret some things. Because even like, I'm gonna go back to what Gaddy said, what God has for you is for you, right? But what is the extent of my understanding when it comes down to that? Because there has to be some type of limitation on it. Because if I do not have a limitation of it, then I will assume that I actually have the mind of Christ already, which we already know that that's not the case. So under those statements, like what God has for you is for you, you don't know what God has for you, and you have to have a reference point to go off of. That's why when I mentioned previously about the dominant voice that kind of help guide you and shape and mold you in your young formative years becomes the limitation to your understanding of what God has for you, is for you. And then within the scope of that, now that's the thing where I believe my work ethics come from, which is why the injection of I got to be twice as smart and work twice as hard compared to someone else, which, as I think we all can agree that was a dominant voice when we were younger. So compared to somebody else, my understanding of what God has for me, it looks different than what God may have for somebody else. And I accept that as my reality because of that inner voice that has been shaped by a dominant voice that kind of helped mold and shape me during my formative years.
And I like that, because that's kind of the problem I was trying to identify in a way. When I start talking about, we tend to build what we believe going forward and what we see going forward based off of the dominant voices. But we always talk about Dr. King, but what was Dr. King's theology? Right? Oh, was he missionary Baptist? Was he Southern Baptist? Was he Pentecost? We don't know. And then even in that, there's sub doctrines that these different people believe. What did he believe? I'm not now. I don't want nobody going to say, "Oh, Gaddy talking bad about Dr. King." But what I'm saying is, we have dominant voices, but so when you talk about getting understanding, like, not even just what God has for me is for me, but what the person that was teaching me that, do I know what they fully believe as it concerns scripture, or even that scripture? So then, as I'm making them the dominant voice in my head, right, I'm going to, a lot of times, because I chose them as my dominant voice, I take what they say at face value every time, and I never go back and dig into that for myself. So no, I don't know what it means when they say what God has for me is for me. I just believe it because I let Reverend, Elder, Pastor, Deacon, so-and-so be the dominant voice. And so we never go back and really gain clarity of the thing, no matter who your dominant voice is. Even if you have to, I think the problem with you have to work twice as hard and be twice as smart is that we don't understand the narrative behind why our grandparents taught us that. because for some of them they had to. They couldn't get into politics without an extensive resume, going to certain schools, gaining certain. They couldn't get into certain offices, even if they were a doctor. They couldn't become an administrator at a hospital unless they had to stand out. They had to be a showstopper, and I understand that was their story. And now the question is, gaining that understanding, do that story still line up with our generation today? So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly the problem I wanted to try to identify. That's why I worded things the way I did a little bit.
And that's going to always be the problem. There is no way to combat that, right? But that's part of the studying and meditating and being not conformed to this world and let this mind be in you. That's part of the process. Part of the process is for you, number one, to recognize a couple of things. First and foremost, it doesn't matter how much education you got. You can have more degrees than a thermometer and still be dumb as a box of rocks. So I think when we cast down all of those things that we think make us great, then we'll recognize in this great pool of information and knowledge and wisdom that comes from the Father, we know absolutely nothing. So now who is it that we're trying to impress, and who are we trying to get the understanding? That inner narrative is the thing that shapes this thing that I call ego as well. So we got to be careful when it comes down to, thinking that my inner narrative is the do all, be all, tell all. My inner narrative is just my inner narrative. It's no more important than yours, mine's, anybody else's. But how much can I disassociate myself from that so I can actually hear what the Father's trying to say to me?
Gotcha. I'm glad that you brought Romans 12 into be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. I think that most people, they can recite that, they can read it, they can look at it, but when you study it, they don't realize that the transformation starts here. So before your manifestations and all that other stuff, anything that you are to put into action can happen. Your mind has to change. And you can't follow him until your mind changed in order to follow him. Because if you just are out here saying, okay, I'm doing, okay, when did you learn to do? People want to do before they learn to do. So it kind of stunts their growth, because they think they already know, they already have arrived, when they haven't arrived anywhere. What they did was made a choice, made a decision. And now you take all of that inner narrative that you had before and you make it go along with you, instead of saying, man, I got to dump some of this stuff. And that's where we're going into this third question. Can your inner narrative attract or repel certain outcomes or experiences?
Good thing get to sleep. So simple answer, yes, it absolutely can. That kind of goes back to what I was saying previously. Like, your inner narrative at first gives you the permission or the restrictions to do a thing. I like when you mention the entirety of Romans chapter 12 and 2. And sometimes, and I'm not saying this against you, I'm adding to what you're saying. Sometimes we believe and we confuse that our mind is our brain. It goes far beyond your brain. Your mind is the entire existence of your being. It's every cell that's in your body. So the way that I receive information, the way that I respond to information also now dictates the outcome of what I do with that information. So if I see this thing that I really want to do, and my mindset says I'm going to try this, I've already given myself permission to fail. So part of that is the reshaping of the understanding that we get to. Either I'm going to do it, like what was it, Yoda that said it? Do or do not. That's it. That's it. That's just the answer. Like, either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. And until you stop giving yourself that gray area in between, I'm going to attempt to do this, I'm going to try my hand at this, and things of that nature, you're not committed to anything. And I think when we really go back and consider the entirety of our life, one of the things I tend to say, that there's only one person that ever heard every lie that you ever told in your life.
Absolutely. I wasn't sure if you was pausing, leaving that suspense, or if I can go. No, I'm saying.
Well, I tend to pause for dramatic effect.
I know, that's why I was waiting. I was like, Nah, but so I like that. But when I'm looking at this question, I'm thinking, yes, of course, but your inner narrative kind of puts you in certain scenarios. I there I put it like this. Sometimes our life experiences are built off of the algorithms that we build, right? You think about social media. We watch a certain set of things over and over again, and social media, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok introduce us to more and more creators that speak on that thing or that speak about that concept, whether we agree with their end game, but the overall concepts is what we get in, is what we see. And sometimes in life, our inner narratives put us allow us to move in certain arenas and in certain spaces, which then opens us up to the things and the experiences or certain groups or organizations, whatever you're into, based upon that thing. I remember at one point I was like, man, and we was talking about music backstage. I was like, I want to get back into my music. I wish I could find these forums like we used to have back at home when I was younger. And then when I started connecting with people who are actually into the music world out here, I'm like, oh, they have them. I'm just not tapped in, And so that's how I think about it. Sometimes the way the way that we view things, right, and which is based upon our inner narrative, the way that we view things and the way that we see things causes to lean towards one thing or refrain from certain things, which then either robs us of experiences or opportunities, or as you put, outcomes, or it would lead us into certain opportunities, experiences, and outcomes.
When we were in Iraq, going back and forth, and we were working with the Iraqi army. When we would ask one of the soldiers, "Hey, are you going to do this, that, or whatever?" And if they came back and said, "Inshallah," when they came back and said that, we asked the interpreter, "What do you think?" He's saying, "Well, he's saying God willing," but then the interpreter was come behind that and say, "But what he's saying is he ain't gonna do it." Because if God don't make him do it, he ain't gonna do it. He just gave an out. And sometimes we give ourselves outs. We sometimes you'll know people who they're in one relationship. The relationship is bad. They get out of that relationship. Oh, I'm not gonna find this. I'm not gonna this, that, and the other. Everything their internet narrative tells them what they're not gonna find, they attract. And then they with the same person and a different person. And then a different person, because it's what they attract, because they aren't changing. What they're doing is telling themselves that they aren't the problem, that the other people were the problem. So sometimes your inner narrative can keep you in a state to where you don't move, and then you'll blame things like when it goes south, you'll say, well, I knew it was my intuition. Your intuition didn't tell you he was a bad person in the first place. So is intuition only when you find out something? Or is intuition your inner you saying that I'm sick of this mess, but I'm not willing to change, and I'm going to accept it again when it comes?
See, I'm no good yet. I'm sorry.
No.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, is that not the case a lot of times? Like, especially in relationships, right? And I know that's not the context right now, but especially in relationships, I think sometimes we actually, and I don't want to say intuition, sometimes we have learned better, or not learned better. We've learned to see things, but we haven't learned to walk away from things. And so a lot of times it's not intuition, it's I've been here before, but it feels good or it feels familiar. So I'm going to take the path that seems more familiar versus the harder path, which is the path for me that is untraveled. So I don't know how to navigate here. I know how to navigate with my typical toxicity in my life. Right. And so I travel in that, whether it's relationship, jobs, or whatever. And so I stay in those realms because it's familiar, it's comfortable. And then 2 years later, I'm gonna complain about it and say all women do or all jobs are. But I chose the familiar path. And so when you say that, that's the way I look at it. Like sometimes it's not necessarily intuition. I hate using that term because we try to make it seem like we have some magical gift to no, we learned better, but we didn't learn how to walk away from those things.
Can you do that chant again?
Yeah.
Well, so you guys remember it was probably about 5 years ago, maybe a little longer than that. The Secret was the hot button thing, right? The book The Secret, then you had the movie The Secret, and The Secret was all about the law of attraction. And so everybody started becoming, oh, the law of attraction. You attract who you are, and you attract, you attract, you attract. But what they didn't realize is that there is something that comes before the law of attraction. And I don't want to get into laws and how law begot law and all kind of other stuff of that nature, because trust me, I can really go down a rabbit hole when it comes down to this conversation, because you can literally use a law to propel you to another law, but the parameters must be set with the right principles in place so that you can actually move above that law. But that's a whole nother conversation I get into at a different point in time. The law of attraction is a subset of the law of energy. So if you don't understand the law of energy, then you will never understand the law of attraction, and you will make it up within yourself based upon your inner narrative again, right? You will make it up within yourself, and you believe that you are attracting a thing, but the only thing that you're really doing is setting the conditions for the thing to be. That's the part that we need to understand. That inner narrative moves you to the space to where you set the conditions for the outcome that you're creating. And so we believe that we're attracting the thing, but is it really an attraction thing, or is it really me setting the conditions for the thing to actually be in that particular space? Going back to the whole relationship thing, right? What are you doing different? What are you doing different in the space of relationship? How are you being different in the space of relationship so that you can now get to the point and set the conditions for different to show up in your life? And a lot of times what we don't think about doing different. We just in our mind say, well, I want different, but yet we still walk around singing songs. Yeah, I know the famous song, I don't want no scrubs. So you want different, but you're singing, I don't want no scrubs. And therefore, next thing you know, scrub shows up, because wherever your energy goes, wherever your attention goes, your energy flows. So now that's the thing that you see. Even though, okay, let me change it around. If you guys got to the point where you wanted to buy a new car, and then you started looking this car up online, and you studied the car online, and then next thing you know, you start driving and all you see is that car going down the street. The same car has been in the street the same amount of time, but your attention has just changed. The same thing happens in every aspect of your life, but it's clear and obvious to you when it comes down to something like a car, or when you get into the house buying process, right? You say, I want a house, I want a 4-bedroom house, and I want this and I want that. So next thing you know, you start looking at houses as you're driving down the street. The same thing happens. It's the inner narrative that exists within you that drives your attention and focus to the thing. Therefore, now you're setting the conditions for it to happen. That's really what the law of attraction is. And we think it's this magical thing. Oh, well, going back to Gaddy Chant, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to think on this thing and say these little chants in this word, and we'll steal what Angela Bassett said on what's love got to do with it. And then that's going to be my mantra that sets the conditions for success, because it's going to come to me. That's not how it works. I'm sorry. I hate to say it that way, but that's reality.
Y'all in this chanting thing. And we wake up, some of us wake up every day. We'll say good morning, and we start complaining about the weather. We start complaining about our car. Coffee too hot, coffee too cold. I stubbed my toe. And we're wondering, why is our day going bad? We said good morning, but we didn't mean it. We just said some words that are just common to us, and we started saying how our day was going to go. We started shaping our reality, because when I get to, nobody better not say nothing to me when I go on this job. I ain't come here for all that. You came here to work, but you don't even want to work. So that's how, another way we can shape our realities, because you start telling yourself a story, and you start seeing, as Coach said, you start seeing that story. Like, I got a new car last week, and I started seeing the car just like mine. Like, yeah, because I was hyper focused on this item. They were already there, but I just wasn't paying attention to them because it didn't bother me. It wasn't moving me one way or another. But I think that this whole inner narrative thing is like when Some of us grew up in the inner city and we hold on to that. That's part of our inner narrative because we grew up in the inner city. It makes us it's a certain blackness, certain hardness to us when we grew up in the inner city. And we always wanted to, man, I can't wait till I get out. But our bodies left, our minds didn't. So our minds are still there. So we still had a negative connotation towards anything that wasn't there, but we still didn't look at that as proper as something that we want to be in. So we shaped our own reality, and we shape our own families. We shape our own communities because when we can't control our minds, we can't control what goes in and stays in, what changes for the better. What we'll do is we'll watch things, we'll read things that facilitate us staying the same. And then we wonder, like, man, why am I still in this place?
But yet we'll listen to some of the things that social media teach us. Don't let nobody change you.
Mhm.
So what do you think they're setting you up to do?
Stay the same.
To stay the same. Yep.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying, man. We will listen to the things that don't serve us, thinking that somebody else has falsified reality, because that's really what it is. It's a false reality. Somebody else, false interpretation of their reality. And then you say, well, I want what they want. Well, you don't even know that they got what they're claiming to have. That's the other side to it. So you're literally adopting the information and the terminologies of a person, and you're taking that into your psyche, thinking that what they're teaching is going to help you change what you're trying to do in your life. No, that's not going to happen that way. I'm sorry, because I can't teach. I can't give you what I don't have. I may use flowery words and the excellency of speech in the thing that I say, but if I don't have it, you listening to me ain't gonna help you get it.
If what you're saying is true, coach, then that means manipulation is it has to be a common behavior. It's because if all of us are trying to get to this 1% lifestyle, we're trying to manipulate those who are in our lives to provide those things, right? This is why we try to we try to guilt or emotionally manipulate people into behaving a certain way. They want to be in relationship with us because we want to force them into an image, so that we can look like this, so we can get this. Is why, oh, he got to make six figures or more, because you want to live this lifestyle. Like every woman is not going to get the 1% man. That's why he's 1%, right? And so, and vice versa. Not every man going to get that 1% woman. That's why they 1%. And so, if that's the case, then we're trying to manipulate people into either looking like it or behaving like it, so that we can gain that that narrative, or that image, that social media image. It has to look good. You brought up the prom earlier. It has to look good on social media. I gotta outdo you, or at least look good enough so I can go viral, so my pictures can go floating around the internet. For what? For self glorification, because it's not gonna profit me nothing,
Did I
right?
bring up the prom?
I did.
No,
Oh,
Ro did earlier.
I was I don't remember something about the prom. So to your point, um, and I'm gonna say it like this: um, everything that you hear that you have not yet put into practice is a concept. I
Yeah.
don't care. I don't really care if it's a proven thing. It is still a concept to you. So until you take that thing and put it into practice, you don't necessarily learn the lessons that you need to learn in reality, because life have to present some other challenges to you based upon this brand new concept that you're trying to practice. So hearing somebody say a thing and seeing their level of success, I think everybody has kind of tried their hand when it came down to multi-level marketing, right?
Mm.
And so what they do is they get the they get the top earners to speak to you. So you think, right? So you think it's the top earners that's speaking to you, and they're teaching you this brand new concept to make you successful at multi-level marketing. But at the end of the day, when you put it into practice, you may achieve some success, but you may not necessarily achieve the level of success that they achieved, or at least you believe they achieved. But in the midst of putting it into practice, you're learning something in real time about yourself, which is the key. And so, as you're learning in real time, what you have to understand is that now, in that particular moment, in that moment in time, there has to be some changes that happen within in order for you to elevate to the place that you need to get to achieve the level of success that you desire. You can practice concepts all you want to, but your growth experience is going to be based upon the internal messaging and learning that happens within you.
Number 4. In what ways is your internal narrative a reflection of your past, and how can you change it?
Well, I literally just told you that. I didn't even realize that, right? Um, if I fail to learn the lesson that life is trying to teach me in any particular moment, I should not ever be surprised when life delivers the same situation. It might look just a little different, but the same situation to me at a later point in time. We literally just talked about the relationship dilemma. A lot of us have not learned the lessons that relationship was trying to teach me in my earlier stages in life. So if I did not learn, and I'm not talking about the lesson that I learned from the other person, I'm talking about the lesson that I learned about me. So when we leave relationship and leave and say, well, this person did this and this person did that and this person did this and this person did that person should not get in a relationship, because what they have not done, if they have not accepted the reality of who they were in that relationship. So once that person does self-reflection, once that person does self-assessment, and once that person make the necessary adjustments about them based upon what they learned in reflection and implemented during assessment, then they'll never get to the point of making anything different. So your past will literally keep repeating itself over and over again. And that holds to be true whether we're talking job, whether we're talking relationship, whether we're talking just anything in your life. Like, life must teach you a lesson about you so that you can change something about you in order to get a different outcome moving forward.
Right. Because if you don't, you continue to choose the same person over and over again, different face. Um, and it kind of goes back to that familiarity I was talking about earlier. That inner narrative, it is a reflection in some sorts of our past, right? Because the way we view things, I believe, is based, like I said in the beginning, I think it's based off of the information we've gathered, the experiences we've had, and and kind of, and I'm gonna throw in what I think it was Coach that brought up, or Roland that brought up, that big voice, whichever the biggest voice is, right? Uh, those are the things that kind of shape our inner narrative, because we all have it, no matter how much we want to say, oh, I don't have any, you do. Um, but it is a part of what has come up from your past. It's just the constant. It's just to me, when we talk about how can you change it, to me, it's about how you view your past. If I'm still living in the trauma, because and I know my behavior health specialist in here, y'all gonna beat me up, but I think sometimes we choose to live in the trauma because we think that that's how we protect ourselves. But I find that the more I live in the trauma of what happens, I fall back into the same situation yet again, because I'm trying so hard to avoid it. I walk right into it. And I don't know how that works, right? Because that's not my focal point, right? But it tends to happen. I'm so worried about finding a woman that is this, and this. And I end up looking for something else and missing those same qualities. But and instead of trying to heal past the trauma and not live based upon it, and trying to view my past from a concept of how can I learn, how can I grow, as Coach say, how can I behave differently myself. Maybe the problem is my behavior attracts that type of person, whether it's friends or significant others or what have you. maybe it's my behavior that attracts that type of person, and so I have to be careful. Or I always attract people who try to use me. Well, maybe because you got such a giving heart, maybe you shouldn't just give just because. Maybe some things need to be vetted. Maybe you don't need to be so easily accessible that people who are always looking to use find you, because people who are looking to use people, they will find the people that they can use. They're going to find it because they're looking for it, right? And so, how do I behave differently so that I can still have my heart of giving, but not be manipulated or not be taken advantage of? So there's something about me. All because they were wrong don't mean that I was right. There's something about me that has to change, that keeps me from this falling back into these same traps every time.
You had spoke on trauma. I wouldn't say it's something that they like or desire. I would say that it's familiar to them.
Yeah, I didn't say like it is. I said my bad. I said that we choose to live in.
Right. I think
Yeah.
the reason may be because it's familiar, and sometimes the going to a place that's not familiar to people is like kind of puts them in a state of fear. But I'm a person, when we're talking about the narrative or reflection of our past, where I grew up and we didn't have a lot, so it was like, hey, we didn't have a microwave growing up. We didn't have a washing machine and a dryer growing up. We had that rug board and the tub and stuff like that. And to me, it was a source of embarrassment because we had to go hang our clothes up and then take them down before people saw them if they are outside. So then iron it and put it up and everything. So that developed something within me. I know it did because I'm the person that they market stuff on TV to. And Coach bad for it too. He'll send me stuff. And then the next thing he send me stuff and I'm getting boxes at the front door just like he get boxes at the front door. Yeah, I'm putting both of us out there. No. But I think the narrative for me was, man, you got the money, buy it at first. But now I see stuff, I know I don't need it, but it's like, man, I gotta have it. So whether it's green smoothies, whether it's I bought a couple months ago, I bought this brand new pizza oven that was on TikTok. I'm like, oh, I gotta get it. It's only $69, man. It's usually $129. I should get two of them and send Coach one. So I bought the thing. I think I used it twice. Now it's in the garage. I got every gadget because
Wait a minute. Wait a minute, man. Wait a minute. You can't send me something that I sent you. I sent it to you.
Yeah, I know. So you wrong. No.
And neither one of them sent anything to me, so I'm just saying,
Hey, we got on the phone and talked about this thing, and I told him how awesome it was. The next thing you know, he done bought it. My bad.
See?
He could have bought two. I'm like, you know what, Gaddy might,
but that's what marketing does. Marketing says, I'm gonna look for people that think they have. I'm gonna make them see that they have a need. When we're talking about workout equipment, you don't see the big dude that got a beer belly sitting up there working out. You see Sean T talking about you can do it, and he got abs of steel. You see all these people on here that don't need to work out telling you, hey, this is the best thing ever. So now you go buy these things. I remember some years ago, I bought the thing that you put on your stomach and it shocks your belly and all that other stuff. Didn't put Nan ab on me, but it shocked me a few times and I just left it alone. And it was almost a sense of they spotted where I see something wrong with me that I think is wrong with me. And they say, man, I got what you need. And that's what we're looking at. When we look at people got the self-help books, people got the relationship gurus, people got this. Anything that you get, I think Coach, you said it earlier, if you don't put it into practice, it's what good is it? If I don't use these things that I purchase, what good are they? It's the same way with if you simply read scripture and you don't put it into practice, what good is it? The narrative that you've shaped is already set in motion to where I'm a good person and that's good enough.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you there. I will also add, because I think this is important. when it comes down to whatever it is that I'm doing, and I know Gaddy mentioned trauma. And Gaddy, correct me if I'm wrong. You said that um, we may go through an event, and I'm not going to call it trauma because most things people call trauma isn't trauma, but we'll go through a thing, and then um, you said and I don't want to misquote you. You said we'll go through a thing, and then you said something on the backside, something along the lines of looking for help or something of that nature. Um, anyway, I might be misquoting you, but I would say it like this: in most cases, coming out of a situation, what we really do is we look for empathy. So we keep telling the story. We keep telling the story about how bad it was. I've been through this. I've done that. Even in the midst of testimonies, it's not really a testimony. It's just a reflection of my past story because I want you to have sympathy for me for what I've been through. I want the attention that I'm going to garner by telling my story because I've been through a lot. Newsflash, everybody's been through a lot. I hate to say it that way. A testimony only becomes a testimony when I take my story, I share my story, and then I point it back to the one who delivered me from that situation. If I never point it back to the one who delivered me from that situation, it's not a testimony. It's just me telling a story about me because I am looking for you to be sympathetic toward what I've been through. I have to go back to the question, in what ways is your inner narrative a reflection of your past and how can you change it? I got to keep stressing it. Again, it's going to keep repeating itself. And the only way to change it is to apply the lessons that I learned about myself. So if I just keep going back and reliving that same story, somebody in the chat talked about thinking, feeling, and choosing, and they tied it to reasoning. Well, there's a trick. There's a key element in the midst of that, because when I'm feeling and I'm feeling in the wrong place, I'm not reasoning any longer, right? I'm not reasoning. I'm only projecting. So the feeling that I am feeling becomes the dominant thing in what it is I'm doing. Therefore, now, because it's the dominant thing in what I'm doing, I am choosing to relay the feelings without any consideration about anything, and that becomes what I'm choosing. So we got to be careful. It's an order that they go in when it comes down to thinking, feeling, and choosing, right? So even though how we feel is not wrong, I say it that way. How I feel is not wrong because how I feel reveals information to me about me as it relates to the situation. When I just take that and throw it out in the atmosphere, that's what I'm choosing to do because at the end of the day, I'm still operating from my lowest existence, my lowest form of existence, going back to you know simple stuff. I like making things simple because when the simpler we can make it, the more it makes sense. So let's kind of break it down to where a seventh grader can understand it. If I have a word that's spelled Hive and that word is hive, anything I put in the front of it should not change the sound of the word hive. I'll change it. I'll make it easier. I'll say CAME, came. If I put the word be in front of came, it's became. It didn't change. So if HAVE spells have, when I put be in front of it, why does it become behave instead of behave? Because in all actuality, I can't have what I say I want unless I become the person that can actually go get it. And a lot of times what we do is we change what we want to have, but we never change the person that we be. So we can't have it.
Bars.
Straight bars right there. I like that.
Now, let's roll over to number 5. How do spiritual practices help reshape or reprogram your inner story?
Oh man, your inner story. So first of all, we use the word spiritual, right? So I'm not going to assume that everybody believes in the same spirit. Them start there. Um, but if we believe in the spirit of the Most High, right? then for me, how do spiritual practices help reshape or reprogram your inner story? Well, if you're tapped into the spiritual to understand when things are moving in the spiritual, that means you have already reshape your narrative going forward. Um, because in order to understand this, I have to be operating in the spiritual. And if I operate in the spiritual, I'm exemplifying one, the fruits of the spirit. And whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reapeth. He who soweth of the flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, and he who soweth of the spirit shall reap that of the spirit. So as that story begin to change, as the narrative begin to change, as my experiences to outcomes begin to change, because now I'm moving differently, then my inner story begin to change. When you talked about you can move me out you said inner city, but you know how we said it, right? You could take me out the hood, but you can't take the hood out the man, right? But when when my when my behavior in the story changes, then I begin to understand the things that I'm exposed to differently, right? If I came into the military and said because I didn't grow up around a bunch of non-black folk, I wasn't gonna hang around the non-black folk in the military, I never would have met certain people who had certain mindsets. I've never met people with different ways of thinking, different walks of life. I'd have chased people who look and act and talk just like me. And therefore, there would have been no exposure and no growth. Therefore, my narrative, my story never changes. Right. But because I allowed myself to be exposed to different people, it exposed me to different understandings, to different mindsets, to different concepts, right? Which put me in different forums and different circles. And now I have more options to choose from of how I react to different scenarios. Because I'm not going to react like I always react, because I know that there's another way. And if I act another way, respond another way, it's going to garner a different outcome. And that changes the story. If you ask me, I believe that's may not be that simple, but
Might be a long-winded response. Um, just want to give it kind of heads up before I get started. And it's going to kind of, but I just put it out there, and I shared the story before. I actually shared it earlier today. I've been fortunate to know a few pilots in my day. Some were fixed wing pilots, some were rotary wing pilots. And if you know anything about, flying any type of aircraft, whether it's a fixed wing aircraft or a rotary wing aircraft, there is a law that works in conjunction with what it is they're trying to do. Now, if you said the law of aerodynamics, you put the wagon before the horse. It's not the law of aerodynamics first, it's the law of gravity. The law of gravity comes first because the law of gravity comes first. What we're trying to do is quote unquote defy gravity. So the only way they could get to the point of defying gravity is exercising some principles as it pertains to gravity. That's where the law of aerodynamics come in at, because it takes the principle of lift and it takes the principle of thrust when we're talking about a fixed wing aircraft. So when you combine the principles of lift and thrust, now you get the law of aerodynamics, which works in your favor. Therefore, in order for it to work, that thing that you're trying to fly must have a flat surface, and that flat surface must span out to a certain area, certain width, and then it has to be able to manipulate the wing, the air that goes beneath the wing. So you guys remember that song. So the air beneath the wing now helps to propel it into the air. That's what the law of aerodynamics is. Rotary wing aircraft do it differently. Instead of going down a runway, it actually has propellers, and the propellers tilt, and that kind of manipulates the air below it. For a fixed wing pilot, one of the things that I thought was rather interesting that I learned is that there's a point of no return. Once you hit the point of no return, there's only two options. Either you're going to fly or you're going to unalive yourself. I say it that way. And so now, when you look at the point of no return, there is no turning back at that point. Now, when you take flight using the law of aerodynamics, you got to go through, you're going into your ascent. In your ascent, that's when you're going to experience the most turbulence. But you got to keep pushing. Thrust is still working for you. You keep pushing through the clouds. When you hit the clouds is where the majority of the turbulence gets. But once you get above the clouds, now you get up to that 30,000 foot altitude. And now you can pretty much go on cruise control. Well, there's a thing in the air up at a certain altitude called the jet stream. And most of them want to get into the jet stream because the jet stream now allows them to fly at maximum speed using less fuel. When we start talking about spiritual practices, the spirit has no allegiance to your past. The spirit has no allegiance to the most dominant voice that taught you the things that you know, which kind of shaped your inner voice. The spirit works according to the governance that it instills upon you. So when you're practicing according to the spirit, it is actually using the law to your advantage. Therefore, now you're not only reprogramming, you're getting to the point of no return, right? Getting outside of your original program, getting to the point of no return, which there is no turning back, right? Now you're reprogramming yourself. And then once you put it into practice, now that becomes your new story, because there is no sense in going back on the ground when he already told you that I created you to fly.
Man, that was good. I wish I was writing that one down, but I can always go back and watch it. But I think that when we're looking at spiritual practices helping reshape or reprogram our inner story, some of us, we will say we meditate, we will say we pray, we will say we study and read and this, but the individual knows, because not only does your studies show it, your life shows it. Because when you meditate, it helps you observe your own thoughts. So now, when you sitting there just you by your lonesome, you know what's crossing your mind. You know what's trying to distract you from the task at hand. You know where. I remember we used to be in church, and I'll be sitting there like, man, the Lions come on at one today. They need to hurry up. And that's how, so I knew where my mind was. But when you in the meditation frame, it's like, okay, it's not just me sitting up here being quiet, but what are you thinking of? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about things that help you? Are you thinking about where you can help others? Are you thinking about your growth? Maybe, maybe not. And it replaces your fear talk with faith-based dialogue, because now I can't just say, oh, I'm going to pray and I'm going to this. I got to study. I got to read, because I got to change what my mind thinks. One, what my mind thinks, period, but what my mind thinks about me, because I got to build a confidence to be disciplined enough to take what the higher being, higher authority has said about me and take that for face value versus what I think. Oh, I'm this and I'm that. That's ego. And when you're speaking out of ego, it's all about me and what I can do. But when I'm speaking spiritually, has zero to do with me and what I can do. It has to do with what he will do through me. Because if it's up to me, I'm going to take the quick road. I'm going to take the short road. So, and when it comes to my past, I reframe my origin story. So whereas I grew up like this and I see negative, I'm like, man, I grew up like that. And in spite of that, I survived. In spite of that, I am here. In spite of that, he thought enough of me to bring me to this point to where now I can look back and help others see that, hey, that's not your end point. And that's not a place where you want to be and a place that you want to glorify. And it reinforced my trust in the higher authority, because now my discipline is such to where I say, okay, I can trust in him. So now if my trust is in him, if my trust is in my higher authority, and it doesn't matter, now for me, it may be one thing, for you, it may be Buddha, it may be Allah, it may be Hare Krishna, whatever it may be, your relationship is your relationship, and you never know. People, hey, come and go, but this is one of those things when we're talking spiritually. Some people will try to say, if you're not this, you can't be that. I know what works for me. So I'm not trying to push mine on you. If we talk about mine, I can tell you about mine, but I'm not going to knock yours and what may work for you.
No, wait a minute, sir. Wait just a doggone minute now. See, we talking about spiritual
Mhm.
practices.
Yes.
Practice. And the things that I do comes from the seat of what I know.
Hmm.
So maybe part of my concern is that what I'm practicing ain't working because I have not seen the results that I want.
That you want.
Right.
Okay.
It's kind of that y'all gonna have to help me here, you scholars, because I'm drawing a blank on the address, but when we start talking about uh I will give you the desires of your heart, right? When that statement is made, it's the understanding that that your heart has changed. So it kind of goes back to how we understand that. I think so we think that we're operating in a spiritual because we're doing things for results versus doing things for the pleasure of the Father.
Hmm.
So therefore, the desires of our hearts haven't changed because it's still under the narrative of my flesh. I If I'm in the spiritual, I don't have to talk about ego no more because I put ego out the door. If I didn't, then we're not talking about the spiritual. We're still talking about the flesh. If I'm talking about vainglory, I'm not talking about the spiritual. I'm talking about the flesh because I still want what I want. And so well, as soon as we start talking about the spiritual and we pushing ourselves out the way, well, guess what? I didn't get the desired outcome because I still want what I want. I did it for a specific outcome. But if I did it for the glory of the Father, then I'm going to be happy with the outcome because I know He's getting the glory.
Right.
This is why you talk about church. This is why we got mad because so and so sung the lead over me, because so and so got to do the opening over me, so and so got to do the prayer over me, because you was worried about what you're doing and how you was going to get glory so that you can be in position to do something, open the church or become a pat or whatever you wanted out of the whole narrative. But if the concept was to glorify the Father, then you know what? Maybe this person have a prayer to pray today. Maybe this person is going to touch somebody when they do the opening. I don't know, right? But it's not about me.
Hmm.
But once it's about me, I don't care how good you feel, how good the song sound, how long you hold your hands up, how much tears you cry. If it's about you, you're not in the spiritual.
But wait, we'll use that same scripture as it pertains to relationship.
We do.
And he gonna give me the desires of my heart, and my heart say I'm ready to get married.
We use that when we get buying the lottery ticket.
Come on.
I mean, because people, the desires of my heart, if your heart is still in control, if you're still in control of your heart, your desire is going to show forth. So you will still be whining at the end of it. Because I think that that's where we don't want to relinquish that. So whereas we can, like you just went, Allen Iverson, we talking about practice. I think we need to look at this thing as, and when we're looking at spiritual is not just a light switch. It's something that you do have to, you got to keep working at. It ain't going to happen overnight. Well, certain things aren't just going to happen overnight. Certain things you going to have to, he going to come to you, going to go to him 3 times and he going to say, hey, my grace is sufficient. You got to put in the work. You got to do, not that you're working because of or to get your glory, but you're working so that now it's some things that you got, it's some ego that may have to be squeezed out of you, because if I give it to you too soon, you're going to think you did it. You're
Yeah,
going to think it was by your hand.
yeah, y'all know I'm just being petty.
I
Um,
do. I
first and foremost, I would say this: most people, we have the impression of a thing, and then you have the reality of a thing. And a lot of us are so stuck into the impression or the illusion of a thing that we're doing a thing based upon what we seen people do when we were growing up. And we do it exactly the same way we seen them do it. And therefore we think that is right. And we're just as arrogant as they were when they were actually doing it. To stand up in front of everybody and do all that foolish. No. You know what I'm saying? No, stop that. Like, that's all about you. You have received your reward. So that little prayer that you're doing that lasted 25 minutes before we ate Thanksgiving dinner, right? That was all about you. You wasn't blessing the food. Most people don't necessarily realize that prayer is actually for me. I'm praying to him, but he is working on me in the midst of my prayer. So even if I'm praying and I believe that I am praying for the desires of my heart, well, what he is doing in the midst of your prayer, he is working in you. That's really what your prayer, like, even if you pray and you know how, okay, let's be real. A lot of us like to pray and ask God for things.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So I'm gonna pray and ask for, and we'll go and use the scripture to justify us asking for things, right? Prayer and supplications, right? We'll justify us asking for things because that's what the scripture tells us to do. But what you don't realize is that you're inviting what he said he is going to give you for that thing. Because it says in the scripture that, again, we take joy in, oh man, I'm messing up, y'all. Y'all Bible scholars, help me out. We take joy in tribulation, knowing that tribulation worketh patience. Patience experience hope, and hope maketh not ashamed. The thing that you want is called hope. In order to get the hope, you're going to have to go through all of that. You're going to have to work on that patience. You're going to have to get the experience, and so forth and so on. So in the midst of prayer, you're asking him to bring the tribulation that is going to shape you to be the person that can receive what you hope for. So keep praying. Yeah, keep praying. Don't stop. Pray without ceasing. Keep praying. Because the tribulation coming, that's what his word says. But you have to get to the point that you take joy in the tribulation. Because if you don't take joy in the tribulation, guess what just happens? Tribulation reset.
Y'all talking today. Y'all talking today. But I'm gonna leave this alone. So we can move on. At the end of the day, when we start talking about setting your mind on, he says set your hopes on things that are eternal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kingdom. So if your mind is not set on the kingdom, everything else you're talking about is going to wither away. So at the end of the day, what is the purpose? What is the goal? If we're setting our minds on things that benefits the now more than the things that are eternal, because store not up for yourselves treasures here on earth that thieves can break in, right? That it could rust, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven where thieves cannot break in, right? So the concept is get your mind, your major focus, and I think this helps with everything under the umbrella of what we talked about. Get your major focus on the kingdom. He says that we must preach the gospel of the kingdom. So we want to preach so many different gospels, but not of things that are eternal, of things that are temporal, and we're expecting lasting satisfaction from temporal comfort. So that's where the focus has to change. How does he get the glory? Let's set our mind on the gospel of the kingdom. And we must know what the gospel of the kingdom is so that we can set our focus. And I think that's some of the problem. We haven't really been taught. The scriptures do tell us, Coach and Roland just pointed that out, tells us what these things, if you want to, I'm ready to get married. Are you ready to be a spouse? Are you ready to be a husband or a wife? Or are you just ready to get a title? Because there's things, see, and being a wife and being a husband is eternal business. But not just having the title husband or wife, but being that. Behave, I think you brought up, right? You got to be before you have. So this way, now we're focused on the things that are eternal. But I'm gonna leave that alone and let that.
and I'm gonna use that somewhere else too. No,
I couldn't wait. I had to use it now.
I love it.
It ain't mine.
Say it ain't yours.
It ain't mine. It's in the word.
That's it. I think that we know where it came from. We've been taught this. So we've been taught a certain rhetoric. We've been taught a certain lifestyle. We've been taught all you got to do. We've been taught how to pray. We've been taught how to live. And all these things that we were so supposedly taught were taught from people who did it from the premise of control. So when I teach you what your money is used for, it's cool if I buy a new car, but when you do, it's like, hold up now, that's taken away from my pockets. And we pray for.
Did you just quote Kevin Gates? You just quoted Kevin Gates. I heard you.
No, I don't even know who that is. No.
He definitely did.
Kevin Gates, the rapper?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. But see, you done threw me off. But when we talking about temporal things, when we talking about cars, we know we listen to Cash Rule, Everything Around Me, Cream, Get the Money, Dollar Dollar Bill, y'all. But we also know those songs that let me get some giving music, or let's bless the First Lady with this. And we teach that if you give, we use those scriptures that weren't supposed to be, used for this, but we'll make it out to be those given scriptures where will a man rob God? Yes, God forbid. Well, how has he robbed me? He robbed me in tithes and offerings. Not realizing that that is talking to the high priest at that time. That's not talking to the everyday layman. That's talking to the high priest. But we'll use it there to say, man, you're not dedicated because you're not giving me your money. And we use those things, and you have people on BT after dark or Sunday morning talking about buy this water, buy this towel. And if you do this, I'll bless you. And so we seek those things before we seek the actual change from within. Because if we seek the change from within, then we'll realize that we can have what we want, but what we want will change. Because what we want will start to look like what he wants. Not me getting a new car, not you wearing a long dress, not all these things that make you palatable for other people, but it makes you palatable to walk within his realm. That leads us to our last question. What does it mean to live from an empowered inner narrative, and how does that affect your future?
I think when, again, because words mean things, right? And when we look at an empowered inner narrative, the root word of empowered is power. There is only one source of power. So at the end of the day, that inner narrative that I must possess in order for it to be powered, for it to be empowered, must come from the only source that has power. All other power outside of his power is an illusion of power that we actually give to somebody else. Therefore, they now have power over us. So to have or possess an empowered inner narrative, that means that I must understand exactly what he said. I must understand what he said about me. I need to understand what he said about my future. I need to understand what he said in the strategic plan that he created that goes far beyond the superficial stuff that we've ever heard when we were younger. I need to understand how to tap into that power. I need to understand how to access this. I need to understand those spiritual practices that are pleasing to him, because it actually gets after what his plan is all about. Like all of those things I have to understand. And when I do, how does that affect my future? My future looks just like what he promised. So again, understanding what he promised, understanding what he instructed me to do in order to access what he promised. Some of us are so focused on what we know how to do, and we think that what we know how to do is actually the gateway to what he promised, because the inner narrative that we possess believes that it is right. And so in the scope of that, what we do is we shut down anything that challenges what we believe that we're doing, what we are thinking in that particular moment. So again, Relinquish what you know so that you can learn what he is trying to teach you, and then allow that to be the driving force of your behavior so that you can experience the future that he promised.
Um, I like how you started. I think if you had asked all three of us this question separate from each other, we would have similar starting points. Because once you use the word empower, well, where does the power come from in order for us to empower through? Um, and our recent study, I would say recent is probably the last couple of years. I think this was probably since Coach started studying with joining us on Saturdays. Uh, we were looking in, or maybe it was me and Ro, I don't know, but we were looking at we see this term, the Lord of Hosts, over and over again, especially in what we call the Old Testament. And when you actually look into it, we know the term the Lord is just the name there, the Yod He Wah is and then of host means to be man of battle, man of war, right? And so when we start talking about empowering, living from an inner, an empowered inner narrative, right? It is empowered by the Most High. I can. So, to me, what does it mean to live from an empowered inner narrative? Is to live from a narrative that tells me what the Scripture tells me, because I know in it there is Yah of battle, or the Lord of hosts. There is one who is constantly in battle, fighting on our behalf in the spiritual in which we cannot see. Right. And so knowing that the battles, even the ones that we read of to come from the prophets, are already won, because he's already prophesied that to us. He's already showed us that it's already won. I'm living from the narrative that he's in control and he's in charge. And so everything else that I'm building off of, it builds, everything else that I'm building off of is built on the concept that he has the power. He's in charge. So therefore, I am empowered because his spirit lives within me. And so everything that I go through, every internal battle that I have, if his spirit is within me, I don't have to fight those things. I just have to give it back unto him. So now I'm living in a space to where it's now unto him who is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all we can ask or think. Right? Because I can't think of the battles. I can't think of the things that I need. I know not of what I should pray. So then there is one who intercedes on my behalf. I don't know what I need half the time. I know what I want sometimes, but I don't know what I need half the time. But he does. And so living in that, and so it should take some of the stress off, because I don't have to stress and worry about everything, because I know he's not going to let me fall too far. And if he does, it's still not too far, because he put me there. If he's in control, if I'm in control and I put myself there, now we're having a whole different conversation. So how does it affect my future? Well, he's in control. And the earth is Yahweh's and the fullness thereof, and those that dwell therein. So
everything y'all just said, but and just to add to that, it's an awareness and a choice that you consciously choose your thoughts, because now you're thinking on the things that you've read, things that you studied, what he said about you. So now you no longer let somebody call you the B word and the H word. You don't call yourself that. You don't identify with negative speaking things, because you realize when you're speaking negatively towards yourself or others, you're speaking negatively towards him, or you're representing him. So now it looks differently, because now your thought pattern has to change. And these brothers, I don't care what they do, because I know them, they would do things within certain parameters anyway. So I can say, no matter what they do, that they not losing me. They not going nowhere. So we can, be men and have discussions and whatever, but it also helps you attract people of like-mindedness, to where we may have a disagreement on something, but we aren't the people that if we have a disagreement, we have one measuring stick. Between us three, we got one measuring stick. Does it line up with this? And period, point blank. And that's where it stops. So it helps us be aligned with like-minded and people that think like us, because we already decided to, man, we gonna shape our habits. We gonna shape how we communicate. We gonna move a certain way, and that way has absolutely nothing to do with us in the beginning, but we were just pushed into it. You were engrafted into it. So now, whenever we communicate with one another, we are speaking. It may not be from the book of Psalms, but we're talking in Psalms and hymns, because we're talking to one another. Like, I realize that no matter what, that's my brother. That's my brother. Women in here, you're my sister, so I'm gonna speak to you a certain way. And when you do that, that's how your futures change, because now I identify you the same way I would identify my mother, the same way I would identify my sister. So when we communicate, my sole purpose is not to uplift you, but to show you his standard. And that will uplift you when you succumb to his standard, not mine. I love this topic. I love this conversation. But as with everything else, all things must come to an end. So we are at the point where we will have our final thoughts.
I just want to read a couple of verses from Philippians 4. Very familiar chapter, right? To those who are in their scriptures. Starting at verse 4, he says, "Rejoice in Yahweh always. And again I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. Yahweh is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things." Every time I read that scripture, I think of the resiliency training that we've had every year, probably twice a year. That's 3 times if something has happened in your uniform, in your outfit, right? Then we get the resiliency training, and one of the things they said every year, part of it is you have to hunt the good stuff. Well, here in Philippians, he gives us the good stuff to hunt. No matter what's going on, let's find the things of virtue, the things of praise. Let's think on these things that will reshape our minds, which would then reshape our inner narratives and keep us focused on the things that are of him, that are not of ourselves or of our flesh. We walk around pouting because things didn't go our way. The hardest pills to swallow is that there's 6 billion people living in this world with you. Things are not always going to go your way. At some point, things got to go his way. At some point, things got to go her way. If the focus is on everything going your way, you're probably trying to manipulate the outcome, and therefore manipulate the people that are around you, and that's something to be careful of. So let's shape our minds on the things that are eternal, and let's move forward, and let's build a better future forward to the kingdom.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. Probably one that you guys are going to want to go back and listen to again, because in the space of our development, your parents were your primary teachers. They were your primary instructors, and they had you through your, pretty much in your young adolescent formative years. And so a lot of the things that they taught you became the foundational of your belief system and understanding. The unfortunate part about that is that they within themselves, they had limited scope and knowledge. But the most important things that they were supposed to do is teach you the law, statutes, and commandments, and then point you to the Creator Himself, point you to the Most High. That's the process that was supposed to happen in your young formative years. Then from there, you were supposed to practice the things that you were taught, just to realize that being able to do it under my own flesh, under my own skin, under my own willpower was like a bridge too far. And then I was supposed to learn. And again, this is before I get into, leaving the house. I was supposed to learn that I needed Christ. I needed a savior. And then getting that relationship and nurturing that relationship at that point, now I get to put into practice in my young adult years what that looks like. So now I get to learn through trial and error the concepts that the Bible teach according to living, according to His word, by His Spirit, so forth and so on. And so over time, those things reshape what you were taught in your young formative years, because there was limited scope and knowledge. So as an adult, I would say still young, 20s, late 20s, early 30s, I can no longer go back and say, well, mama didn't teach me this and daddy didn't teach me that. Like if I'm still doing that, then I'm living in the space of what I tend to call a blame game. So I'm blaming, where I am on them, but not necessarily accepting responsibility of the behaviors that I'm exercising in real time, and recognizing that I am setting the conditions for the outcome that I'm living in. And so all of that becomes information to me in order to cast down what it is I think I know, so that He can teach me the thing that He wants me to know incrementally throughout the course of time, therefore developing a more empowered and nurturing relationship through Christ Jesus by faith. That's how we get to the point of the inner narrative being reshaped from the limited belief system that we had previously into a belief system that recognizes exactly what He says, that I can do all things through Christ Jesus that strengthen me. That kind of gets after it. Like in a nutshell, we can spend another hour and a half talking about this, but that's it in a nutshell. We have to get to the point that we believe exactly what He said without any limitations, understanding that He is the author and finisher of our faith. Therefore, now my faith grows over time through practice, because I am believing without limitations exactly what He said, not just about me, but about the future, but about my circumstance and things of that nature. So I just kind of wanted to say all that and then leave it right there, because I think that's the key when it comes down to why your inner narrative shapes your reality.
Sometimes we see things and we say things that sound good. We will quote scriptures where we're receiving blessings. We never take the notion that on the other side of that, it's a second side to that coin. And there are situations where when you don't do, something happens to you. We need to be in a place where we can also look in the mirror and see where our problems start. Most of our problems might start in the mirror, might start with you, might start in your mind, might start with how you talk about yourself. So when you say, I'm going to have a bad day, you may not have said those words, but you started out with that source of negativity and you planted that seed where the frustration and the anxiety and everything was built up. So now that's exactly what grows. That's what you sought out. So you got to be able to control your beliefs, control your assumptions, look at how you interpret things that happen to you, whether they happen to you or for you, because some things happen for you to move from where you are to get you to where you should be. So you can't have future expectations that will look bright and you're focused on something dull, something when it comes to the things of the Most High, you can focus on a lot of things that are living and you can talk about it. But if you don't focus on it to where you want to implement it into your life, then it will show in your life that this was not even the focus of yours. You focus on the things that you could attain rather than Him attaining you and you attaining Him. So at the end of the day, when we're looking at this whole narrative that shapes our reality, we got to change how we view us first and foremost, so that our narrative about us will change. And when your narrative changes about you, it changes what you will accept. It changes what you will push off on other people. I appreciate you guys for showing up. I appreciate these brothers for standing with me and coming with it tonight, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for coming out. We will have tomorrow at 10:30 Eastern. We will be right back here. And then on Sunday, we will be on the Voice of Reasons platform for our Sunday brunch. And then 2:00 Eastern Standard Time, there will be Bible study. Show up so we can show out. It's not about us. It's all about him. So we thank you. We appreciate you for your studio of behaviors on tonight.